all beings, y'all. Let's get it.
Put your hands together. Put your hands together.
Yeah! Welcome back to Calling All Beings on a, what night is it? Thursday night, right, Debs?
Yes, it is indeed.
Yes! I'm your host, DJ, and we're here to have some reaction to the biggest news in history. Not a real big deal. We don't have the brotherhood of our brother, the co-conspirator, in our quest for fun, entertaining, introspective, and cool UFO talk. Money Nathan, he was not able to join us this evening. Well, guess what? We did bring something, didn't we, Debs?
We brought a little bit of extra something special.
Yeah, that is right there. My co-host, one of the original gangsters of this joint, the host of Deb's Data Dojo at A Study of UAPs, is the centerpiece of this joint. Debs! So, one love to your girlfriend. So, we weren't able to get Money Nathan. We weren't able to get Leah Primetime. Frank is probably sleeping right now. And Matt is chasing a Bigfoot interview tonight as we speak. He had something going on. He had to record when he could get this person. But, you know, guess what? We got for you our first special guest is the host of the Quantum Witch Cafe. This girl is learned, intelligent, UFO book club. She speaks at these events, intros people. So put your hands together for Priscilla, the Quantum Witch, baby. Yes.
Still classic. Still classic.
Can I get it? Amen.
You're going to record my intro for my podcast and announce me before every time I go on.
Anytime you want. Priscilla, so I called Priscilla this evening, Debs, and while she was excited to come on with us, there was an additional level of excitement when I mentioned the name of our next guest tonight, who's going to break it down, who does so much work on TikTok. Yes. Everybody loves him, and Priscilla's like, ooh, damn, okay, yeah. So, party people, put those hands together for my man. Hey, look over there, Dan Warren.
Hey, what's up, guys? How's everybody doing tonight?
Can I get an amen for Tennessee's own?
All right, I just want to check. Is my audio coming in all right? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you sound good, brother.
Perfect.
Welcome,
Thank
Dan.
you.
Thank you for coming in on short notice because we didn't have all the cabbies, and I'm like, man, I hope we can get some of the brothers and sisters in here. And you answered the call,
I'm notorious because I've labeled myself as the backup guest. Like that's my niche. Like usually when someone cancels, they'll call me, and that's when I get my moment.
You were you were the
absurd.
First choice when I asked you, all right? When you came on my show like a year ago or so, I was like watching your TikToks. I'm like, this guy needs to come on. So you were a first choice that time. So not a backup.
I also want to say, of all the interviews I've done, I do think that my interview with Priscilla might have been my favorite one because I got to speculate more than I did ever before on that one. That was fun. That was an interesting one.
I felt definitely like that was like a treat because I know you don't do that. I know you're like facts, and you're so good at it. And so we got you to speculate a little.
I got news for you, Dan. Priscilla is a lot of people's favorites, so you're in good company there. And man, we don't had you. You saying you're a backup guest? I've had you on round tables like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago.
I'm moving up into batting order, I'll say, but I started out as the backup guest.
As far as I'm concerned, Dan, you would be in the backcourt right next to LeBron. I would yank. I would yank that point guard for the Lakers out there, and you'd be right next to Bron. Yeah, D'Lo, man, exactly. He didn't play that well in the playoffs, unfortunately. So anyway, all right. So let's get to it. People don't want to hear me talk; they came to hear you guys talk. So I was thinking, and I just want to ask you guys, Priscilla, Dan, and Deb, should we just go with like initial reactions? Just go around the table with that, just what you felt like when you heard this news. I feel like that's a good place to start, unless anyone disagrees.
Let's do it.
It works for me, and I'll say ladies first on.
Okay. Debs.
Okay, so I guess because of the history of the topic and being really knowledgeable about it, for me, it wasn't as shocking that someone came out to say that they were aware of UFO programs and entities and crashes and all that, because it's happened many, many times before. And it's been happening, since the 1800s at least. So for me, I guess I just had of course, kind of reaction to it. So yeah, it's just, to me, it's a domino getting ready to set off some more dominoes.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping, right? That'll give some aid and comfort to David Grusch, right? When those other dominoes start to fall in the form of people who were either directly or tangentially involved with these programs, that they come forward and with the IG make the same assertions that he did, get cleared, and now he doesn't feel like he's sitting out there on an island. Yeah, when you were talking about knowledgeable people, I thought you were going to say me. Just kidding. So anyway, Dan only has 30 minutes. So Dan, when you want that video played, we have it queued up. So just let me know, and we'll go with that. Okay. And then let's go with Priscilla. Priscilla, tell us like where you were, your reaction. I don't know if you were getting the kids ready. What happened? What did you feel like?
Well, I was in Arizona for a wedding, a celebration. And I'd been either on a plane or with family that I hadn't seen since pre-COVID. So I was not looking at the internet. I think I was posting things here and there, but I wasn't really paying attention. Sunday, I did not pay attention to anything. Monday, I was visiting all the family I could because I had a red eye. And I finally get to the airport and I sit down. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's going on in UFO land. And let me tell you, I was like, wait, what? I mean, it's like Deb said, like it was a matter of time. But at the same time, it's just it's not like surprised to see that it happened, but it's just so cool to see that it happened, especially with, the protection of, the NDA, of the legislation.
NDAA. Yep. I'll get to me, but let's go to Dan Warren. Dan, where were you? When did you hear this? What was your reaction? Were you like driving to work with a big smile? Like what happened?
Yeah, I think I had dropped my daughter off at volleyball practice in the morning and was heading into work and started catching whiffs of what was going on. And I responded in the typical manner that I do when I get news related to UFOs, is I assume it's nothing and hope that it's something. So and a lot of my reaction, I try to be reserved with it until I start seeing how other people are reacting to it as well, because there's a lot more people that are tuned in and are very have a very niche body of knowledge, like Douglas Dean Johnson. Like that's somebody that I want to hear his reaction before I kind of lay my chips on the table. Like I want to test the waters before I respond. But as the day progressed, my chest started getting tighter because I was like, this just seems like it's going one direction and it's getting more and more backed up by other people. There's more credentials being laid on the table. The big thing to me was the involvement of the lawyer for him, which is the former Intelligence Community Inspector General, who is representing him to the current Inspector General. As soon as I heard that, I was like, well, that is like a great battle to witness if we could be in that courtroom or however they have those discussions. Like the guy that wrote the rules is representing the guy that is going up against the existing Inspector General. So when I started figuring that out and putting those together, it really amped up my anxiety of, is this it? Is this coming? And then to find out that we were getting a few clips of a 7-hour interview, that who knows what's inside that interview that we're going to find out about on Sunday. It just continued to amp me up. And so it is a great thing. But of course, like Deb says, hey, this is just par for the course. This kind of thing happens, but it does, in my opinion, feel different this time around based on the preceding events, such as people saying that the rumors of people saying that they told Arrow these things, and then they were upset when they heard Kirkpatrick say that they got no evidence. And so it almost felt like it was a retaliation to Kirkpatrick's lack of investigative skills. I'll call it, for follow-up skills on the testimony that he received. I almost felt like they were insulted, and this was the result of it.
Interesting. That's an interesting context that I hadn't heard yet, Dan, that people were pissed off after his briefing, which was in early to mid-April, I believe, and then the subsequent briefing with NASA, the part 2. The lawyer you spoke of is Charles McCullough III, senior partner of the Compass Rose Legal Group in D.C., the original IG of the IC community. So I got that from this article. I'll link people to it with Jonathan Wolf. I shared it the other day. I think somebody shared it with me. It might have been Shannon Scott, but someone shared it in that it's a legal perspective on this case. So it was really, really interesting. For my part, I talked to our good friend from UFO Twitter, Richard Budd, around April 21st. Didn't know the name of this person, didn't know when it was going to happen, but he said that, something's going to happen. And I said, why? Why are people that are cleared going to do this? And he said, well, because they're pissed off, because they've been mistreated or intimidated or been treated in a way that's doesn't comport with our values as a GOV. So that's their impetus to want to do this. So I was like, oh, okay. And that's all I knew. And I had no idea that it was going to happen that Monday. I was just, as surprised as anybody when Monday morning I woke up and this news came out. And I felt really good, Dan, because I always am thinking that everything is a nothing burger. I've thought every briefing that I've heard on this topic was a nothing burger so far from the Pentagon. And I see I did the British intonation there. And so I expected, nothing better. And then all of a sudden this happened, and it was just absolutely shocking that it did happen. So I'm so gratified for the community. And now, here's the point about it. And this is, what I want to say, just like initially. When there's something that's of a top secret nature, that's in a sensitive, compartmentalized information nature, and it's in a SAP, then we assume that everything about it, if you talk about it, it's damaging. And I've had that clearance, but although I'm not an expert in intel, I don't know how to disseminate intelligence. I'm not an analyst or any of that sort of thing. And these people are saying, no, you can let people know, particularly legislators that are paying for it, that the program exists. The nature of the program, what they've derived and exploited, and what they found and discovered, and what they have, you don't necessarily have to give all that up, because then obviously our enemy will have that exact same information. But you can tell something, and that's what these intel professionals are telling us. So with that, let me go back to Deb's again. Deb, second round.
So I wanted to say that in response to what Dan said, there is somewhat of a rumor that Kirkpatrick is linked to some of these people and is actually a believer in non-human intelligence. And to be, pretty frank, I believe Green Street started that rumor. And it's based off a picture of a group of people who spoke to Brandon Fugel about Skinwalker Ranch. And if that is the case, he may be aware that this was going to happen, or was aware that this is going to happen, and may not have been completely sidelined, so to speak. That's a possibility. I can't rule it out. And I also think that it could also be the whole thing is about this lack of access that Arrow has, and to really magnify that they can't even investigate this. They don't even have the power to investigate these things because they're not at that level to be able to.
They're not read in. They're not read in to it.
Right.
So just in response to what you said, in response to what Dan said, Ross Coulthard said, now this is just, I'm quoting Ross here, that Kirkpatrick most certainly knows. I don't know how Ross knows what he knows. And that even if they're not, and I believe that they're not read into those programs, because that basically is what David Grusch is telling you. We were not read into them, but those people came to me based on a lot of things that we don't know yet, things that are still being held by the IGIC. But what we do know is that, or what we can suspect, I should say that, is perhaps Kirkpatrick knows for the same reason that Grusch knew, because he's the director of the program, and perhaps people have approached him. But I can't say that he definitely knows, but Ross Coulthard does believe he knows.
So let me chime in on Kirkpatrick real quick, because I've heard similar things from Green Street. I think it was basically that they had an interview with Brandon Fugel, and Kirkpatrick started the meeting by saying, "You don't have to convince us or convince me of UFOs. I believe that they exist. Now prove. Now let's talk about this other thing." I think that was the overarching discussion that was had. But when you take someone out of what your personal beliefs, your personal environment, and put them in a situation where you say, "Now I want you to prove this to me." I could sit here, and it's a different story. I could sit here and say, "I got a good jump shot." And then you could turn around and say, "Prove it to me, but I'm not going to give you a basketball." So when I look at Kirkpatrick, he doesn't have the information available to prove his belief with the available information at hand. So he's, in my opinion, taken the J. Allen Hynek route, where he is going with the information that he has, and he can't use current data to prove his point. But as time goes on, if the statements that we've heard about him are true, he will eventually come around and begin to, just like J. Allen Hynek, become a believer, and because he's been able to prove it to himself, and he can turn around and prove it to you and I. I think that's the trajectory that he's on. I hope he lasts that long, because I've also heard a lot of rumors about him not going to make it in that position for the rest of the year. So I don't know what his future holds, but I think that I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise.
I really like that, because there's only two data points here that we have. We have that he said, I don't know, I don't have this information. He said that, I don't know of any extraterrestrial anything. And the data point that David Grusch says that as when I was part of the UAPTF, we were not read into these programs. So we have that at face value. So anything that somebody says, if Ross may know things that we don't know and have spoken to people that we haven't spoken with, that maybe he, knows more from unofficially the way that Grusch is, but we don't know that. So I have to agree with you, Dan. We can't really make any further assertion based on the data. We have those two data points. Priscilla.
What I found interesting about in the article put out by the debrief, it was the fact that Grusch was sort of more concerned, maybe a little upset about the nesting of UAP programs within other departments. So it makes it really hard for people studying this now to get the clearance, to find, even if you have the clearance, where do you look for this? That's very concerning. And it was also mentioned that, if that's what they're doing, then it's illegal. So that is another huge thing that was brought up in the article that was concerning to me as well, which we knew was the case, as we've heard before. But it just concerns me and other people that the nesting of these UAP programs might make it hard for us to find like a complete set of evidence. Do you know what I mean? Like there might be something here, and then we find something here, and then the missing piece might not be found because of where it's hidden or kept.
There's no question is until you are read into that program and you sign that piece of paper that talks about jail time and talks about fines and all these sorts of things, until you sign that, you can have the highest clearance that, you can have a TSSCI with Poly, you can have one of those Department of Energy clearances, et cetera. It doesn't really matter. You don't have the need to know until you read into that program, which you go through a briefing, you sign that paper, now you're in. Now, when you leave service, you sign out of that program that you're not going to talk about that, just like I did, just like everybody did, Ramirez, et cetera. Then you read out of that program and say that you won't talk about it. So you're right. They could be compartmented, But the good news, Priscilla, is that a number of these people have come forward to him, and if they see that he doesn't get railroaded somehow, maybe they're going to come forward. This is their crash test dummy, right, Deb?
Which, by the way, was invented long after 1947.
I know. I remember those PSAs. What does this tell us about Roswell, Dan? Because he said this goes all the way back, to the cold. I mean, he's dating it further back. I think it alludes to the video that you're going to have us show, and we'll be ready to play that whenever you're ready. Does this tell you anything about Roswell?
Nothing specifically about Roswell. Roswell has been mentioned at this point, but he has alluded to a decades-long Cold War to basically figure out the technology associated with UFOs that goes back 90 years to 1933. And that's what I made this video about, that DJ's apparently, with Deb's help, I think she's the brains behind the operation, is able to play. And I can't sit here and describe it well, but I did make a 3-minute video about it. So if you want to play it, that's great. And it can just kind of give us some context behind the event that that Grusch is talking about right now. That's going to be hopefully more information will come out about it in the 7-hour interview that comes up later.
Dan, I hope you have the popcorn done well before the 8 o'clock hour. But anyway, I just do want to say hello to Julie before we play this. Hello to Julie in the chat. I see Delta's here. Chris is here. I saw Bob Marley earlier, right? I see Anon. Hello, Anon ET. Welcome back. And thank you, Julie, for doing this once again on short notice. Thank you, everybody. If you have questions, we'll get to them after. I'm going to open the floor so any of these people can ask anyone a question, and it doesn't look like I'm directing traffic. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this video up and going for everyone.
While we're waiting, I'll clarify. I'm not a popcorn guy. I'm a spicy pork rind guy. So I'll have the bag ready.
God bless you, Dan. We haven't even asked you your favorite potato chips. It's part of the cap poll, nor have we asked Priscilla.
No, you asked me.
While this, did I ask you?
You asked me on a call one time.
On that call recently, yeah. We'll have to go over that again, but we're going to need to know your favorite potato chips, seasoned or salted, etc. But let's get this up there and see if we get this going here. Here we go. Okay, play it.
3, it's reported that fascists not only saw a UFO, but they actually recovered. 33, it's reported that fascists not only saw a UFO, but they actually recovered one. Oh yeah, you're going to want to hear this one. With UFO sightings dating back to 1931 when Mussolini was in power, and a flap of UFO sightings that occurred until 1940, which resulted in Mussolini himself setting up a secret commission to study the objects, which led to the creation of what is known as the Fascist UFO Files. April 11th, 1933. A UFO crashes or lands near Magenta in Lombardy, Italy. Italian authorities swoop in and take possession of the craft. 14 years before the Roswell incident occurs, Mussolini is informed of what has occurred, and he authorizes a thorough investigation of the object by an obscure wartime intelligence unit called the RS-33. They quickly move the object to a secure hangar on SIAI property. Upon initial investigation, they think the craft may be a French or German superweapon. But upon closer investigation, Senator Marconi, who is the president of the Royal Italian Academy of Sciences, a recipient of Italy's Nobel Prize, and their most famous scientist and inventor, came to believe that the craft was extraterrestrial in nature, from Mars specifically, and he began to refer to it as an unconventional flying vehicle. This information is available thanks to the work of Roberto Pinotti, because he has evidence of this occurring thanks to 3 telegrams, which had a professional forensic analysis performed on them and they were deemed original and authentic. One of these telegrams even states that Mussolini himself ordered absolute silence in regards to these craft. But as things went south for Italy during WW2, all their research and files on these crafts ended up in German hands. And on March 23, 1941, Mussolini made a speech where he stated, It's more likely that the United States will be invaded by unknown but warlike inhabitants from the planet Mars who will come down from the starry place on unimaginable flying fortresses than by the soldiers of the Axis. And shortly after that, in 1942, the Battle of Los Angeles occurred. So did Mussolini know something? But thankfully, in April of 1945, the boys of the 1st Armored Division captured the hangar that the 1933 Magenta UFO was rumored to be stored in, where it was promptly packed up and shipped back to the good old US of A. Whereabouts unknown. But the guy that used to lead the Pentagon's UFO investigation has heard a thing or two about this incident.
But Roswell may not have been the first event. I mean, there's been some reporting internationally as well that there have been some crashed vehicles, and they were obtained by local authorities, and there was some scientific study done on them. There is some documentation that has been validated that was from Mussolini himself. It's authentic. It's been proven to be authentic, the documentation. And after World War II, allegedly, parts of that vehicle were brought to the United States.
Man, can I get an amen?
Video, yeah.
I've gotten better at volume control and adjustment since I made that video. Sorry for people whose eardrums are hurting right now.
No, your beard doesn't
that was
look half
great.
bad either. So your favorite potato chips, Dan, before we go any further?
You're not going to like this, Cheetos.
I am going to like that. Those are not potato chips, though. Those are favorite chips. So if we just go with potato. But I love
Potato
Cheetos.
chips. I mean, I'm not. You're not gonna like it. I'm gonna go with a corn chip and a Fritos. I don't go potato chips very
potato chip.
often. It's just not
Okay.
in my wheelhouse.
Okay.
You literally like all the
Doritos.
things that my kids leave in the box. I
Oh.
should just send them to you.
Now we know who's on the Fritos too, right?
Yes.
Frito
Poly chip like Dr. Kreipel. All right. So, Priscilla, potato chips, can you remind me, please?
It was both. I like ridged, non-ridged.
Salted and seasoned, right?
Yeah,
Your
it has to be a mix. It can't just be
your poly chip, Dr. Jeff
poly
Kreipel.
chip. That's right. I forgot that.
All right. Okay. I just want to open the floor for anybody to ask anybody a question. Just go ahead and talk amongst yourselves, as Linda Richmond might have said.
Well, I'm just excited that we're really paying attention to the history of crash retrievals. I cannot wait to talk more about that today because it's one of the things that really piqued my interest. And there is so much that is available already in government FOIAs waiting for people to look at. And I'm glad that people might actually be taking a serious look now. So
Yes.
So this reminds me of a conversation I had on Twitter earlier today, where with Dave Grusch stating this historical start date for the UFO phenomenon. It's making what once was old new again. So it's like refreshing everything. I've had a conversation with George Knapp offline where I was asking him questions about the history of Project Saucer, which was the first UFO office, I'll call it, that was quickly renamed to Project Grudge, I want to say. I might be getting that name wrong, but he said, well, it's in this book by Edward Ruppelt. No one looks at these old books anymore. There's so much history in these books that people just ignore. And that's one of the things that I think is great about the current situation is people are going to be looking back now at the historical cases like Deb was saying, and it's going to reinvigorate those subjects, those crashes. That's going to be a fun ride.
Something beautiful about this is that everybody is sort of stimulated by a different aspect of this story, and you guys have just laid out yours. And that's great, because we don't need to be all the same. I'm very stimulated by the fact that somebody who's in the know, who has seen documents, seen photos, seen videos, and while he has not seen the craft himself, he's come forward, and that's good enough for me. We have placed the public trust in this individual up to and including, as you heard Ross say, this man has been there putting together intel briefings for the president. previously. Another person told me that knows him that said that he was a wonder kid when they needed to execute using technology certain types of counterattacks and attacks. He figured out how to do things that other people didn't, which is why they used flag officers to vet this individual. So if he says, I saw it, and people, these are the folks that I spoke with, well, the IG is going to be able to independently verify that, and obviously it's quite credible. And this has never happened in the history of our country. Even Lou, didn't have this information. So it's a moment. This moment it's the beginning of the beginning. It's the beginning of the beginning, but it's that's what's so amazing about it to me. So, Priscilla, anything? Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
I'm sorry.
No, but I was talking. That was a Rochambeau. Just real quick, the article also talks about Jonathan Gray from NASIC. So, and he's saying the same stuff. We're talking Wright Patterson, which how long have we all been like Wright Patterson? You know what I mean? Like, and now this is just like surprising that it's being written and and talked about now, but also just like we freaking knew it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of refreshing to see like all these like connections coming out publicly.
I said to my British friends, I'll get to you right now, Dan, and remind me we have a starred question in the chat here. But I said to our British friends, I said, Bob Lazar going, how you like me now, brother? Huh? What? That's what Bob Lazar's saying. And guess what? Rick Doty said the exact same things from back in the 80s when he was at Kirtland. So you have that. Dan, you were going to say something right before Priscilla spoke.
Before I so rudely interrupted her, my apologies, Priscilla.
Yes.
But I just want something that I found interesting about David's testimony so far is that he's stating that some of the information that he has received are from people that he's known his entire career. So those are his mentors that he went through the department with. And I've never worked with someone for 14 years. I think that was his career. If I had worked with someone for 14 years, you establish a bond, you establish trust. And it wasn't until the very end of his career that they started telling him these things, that they started confiding in him when he became a member of the UAP task force. That to me speaks volumes because there's a trust both directions. Those mentors of his don't want to mislead him. Those mentors look at David as their legacy because the next generation is going to replace each and every one of us. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of them, that we're leading them in the right direction to be successful. So that to me kind of stood out as man, if my bosses told me, if the people that I've worked with all my career said things to me in confidence like that, I would believe them too. I would have a lot of confidence that they're not looking to mislead, that they're being straightforward and honest with me. So I think that's a major aspect of this that goes unmentioned, unnoticed, and it's intangible. So I understand why, but I think it's interesting.
I think what you've said, Dan, is it's not debunkable. Based on all those factors, the flag officers that came out, the vetting that went on, first of all, from the IG before this even got out there. Second of all, from the reporters, Ralph and Blumenthal and Leslie, also by Ross Coulthard, also by the debrief. So we have what? There's 4 layers if you count Leslie and Ralph as one. We have 4 layers that everybody went through to vet who this person is. And the person I spoke with, I said, I'm
not willing to go 100% though.
I'm not asking you to go anywhere. I'm just saying it's not people that are debunking him and his motives. It's not debunkable from a standpoint that this has been gone over by a number of people that have vetted him. Anybody can say, I don't believe you until you show it to me. I don't care if somebody says that. That's just not what life is. People believe in God that have never physically seen him. So, it's just, there's a lot of things we believe in. We believe that Social Security is going to be there when we retire, but we don't know. So anyway, all right. So Chris, M-S says, how can Congress access the, let me put this up there. So Chris, how can Congress access the goodies? So we don't know that they, Dan and Priscilla, Deb, correct me. We don't know that they haven't already received this information in closed session. And then you have the complete body of Congress. You have the folks that are on the intel committees and subcommittees that have a different level of clearance than everybody has. So that's a little bit of an ambiguous question. But here's from a FAR's perspective, a federal regulation, acquisition regulation perspective. It's kind of like this. When you have a contract that they're funding, that they're paying, underneath that you have CLINs, C-L-I-N, contract line item numbers. And in that contract, buried somewhere, are these programs. The problem of what one of the many issues that David's pointing out is that Congress is funding these programs and they don't know it. They don't know that these programs exist. So this program could say, I'm just going to throw out just something fictitious, but it could say Area 51 maintenance contract. Aircraft maintenance contract and or experimental aircraft maintenance contract, and contract line item numbers underneath that. One of them may be paying for I'm just throwing this out there, a reverse engineering program, but Congress needs to know because they're paying for it. They're paying a big bill because they may have X number of contractors that are being paid to try to work on that craft and figure it out, but they don't know that. That is at least just one aspect of what he's pointing out. And essentially what they're saying is, and I'm not, the foremost person on government, we do have a friend who's a government lawyer. But that right there is why what people think is illegal. They don't know what they're paying for. So
I just wanted to say that I've heard stories about spending that involved like spending like $500 for a food item. So there's some room to kind of change what the budget looks like, and it is probably illegal. And that's definitely something that will probably be scrutinized at some point. But the bigger thing about the Congress aspect is, Senator Gillibrand, Marco Rubio, those people who are all about this topic are not saying a word right now. And people are constantly saying, well, where are you? Why aren't you saying anything? And they're just silent. So that's pretty telling that they're maybe perhaps afraid to reveal something.
I was going to say, Chris, no, that was a good question, but go ahead.
Let me double down on or respond to Chris real quick. I think when he says goodies, he means craft. That's what I think he's referring to specifically. Can Congress get access to the material? So for me, what I think, and this is going to echo what you two, let me see how to do this. You two are saying is that the only way that Congress is going to be able to influence the DoD mechanism is through the power of the purse, just like you guys have both touched on. Until the Congress, the Appropriations Committee says, all right, look, we've got these questions that you're not giving us answers to. We're going to pull back a lot of funding until you tell us what they need to hold them hostage financially is what it boils down to. That's when the military industrial complex will have to go, all right, well, we got to keep this thing going. So we got to give them something. So here we go. Let's bring them in for a tour. Let's do something to get their hands on the goodies. That's what I think that they're going to have to do.
Let me speak to that real quick. This is not a matter of the military industrial complex. They do not have control of these items. Control of these items is being controlled by the U.S. government. The contractors, the military industrial contractors, are the ones who hire the contractors that analyze and try to reverse engineer and scientifically evaluate these materials. So it's not a question of the military industrial complex. It's a question of clearance. So whether or not I also agree with Dan that they can hold the purse strings to get at least admitting what level that they can get cleared to. I mean, you're not, unless you get an OCA, an original classification authority, to declassify that. And that could be the president, by the way, because as you guys know, he can declassify anything he wants. or the person, the original, whoever that original classification authority is, to downgrade that so that Congress could, how much they can know. That could happen to a degree, but I don't think, in answer to his question, I don't think they'll probably see photos of things. They'll probably see documentations of things. I don't think you'll be marching congressmen and women through secret sites to look at it and touch it. And nor do I think that that's necessary, but it is necessary that they know what it is they're spent. We're, just to make an example, we're reverse engineering craft. This is what the program is. This is what you're paying for. This is some documentation that describes it. That's reasonable without bringing them in there and showing, oh, this is what we've learned to make it do. Because now that person is now read into, the highest programs we have, and they could be leaving office in 18 months from now. So see the balance?
Yeah.
Priscilla?
Maybe they could just give them a ride instead of trying to explain how it works.
That would answer all the questions for sure. I mean, how much of this is going to be sort of like protected by national security, right? So how much of this is going to be legal as well? Like even if they know like it's in this department, this is the name of the project. What if they're saying, well, you don't have the clearance, and you know how long it takes to get some sorts of clearance. So how long can this be drawn out by the people that don't want to see this public, even though they're doing something illegal, right? Like we know legal battle's not overnight. So I'm kind of worried a little bit that they're going to say we can't share this with even Congress right now because they don't have the clearance, they don't have the need to know, and it's a matter of national security.
Can I chime in on this a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to pull out some of the history that I love to talk about. So in the 90s, the CIA was looking at a USSR and Chinese study of UAPs that back then was called UFOs. And it was a joint study that they did together, and they claimed that they had at least 10 objects retrieved. That was the 90s. So if we're 30 years late being honest about the fact that we have these objects, you can bet our not so friendly companions on the world don't care. And the Cold War issue is kind of still at play. So I just personally think, we need to just get over telling people the truth so that we can advance on this topic, because we're kind of leaving it to other people to advance and potentially, crack something. And I think that's
you do bring up a good point, because
the reasons that
Hey, Deb, we may have to have you just step out and come back because your audio is, we've missed part of the last minute that you've been speaking.
She does bring up a good point.
For a minute. It was strange.
Okay. Go ahead. Whoever's up now, whichever, you, Deb, or Dan.
I'll follow up on Deb's comments. She did say that basically the classification is restrictive to science. So maybe what needs to happen is they need to lower the classification of these programs so that more people can get involved with the research, so that we can speed up our understanding and research of the craft or material or whatever it is. It's so restricted that it's stagnating, is what it sounds like. But hey, on that note, I'm about at my time limit.
Okay,
so
buddy.
I gotta thank you for your time, and good to see everybody. And buckle up. Sunday's going to be fun, guys.
Oh,
Dan, thank you for joining us, brother. And let everybody else say goodbye. Go ahead, Debs.
Thank you. I look forward to more videos.
I'm working on one tonight, so we'll see how it goes.
Keep cranking them out. You're doing a great job. I love your work, and you're just so quick and so precise. So keep doing it. It's great.
We admire you, Dan. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Peace. Okay, so this is what I was going to say to you guys. I was talking.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
No, when you're done, I have a question for you guys.
So I was talking to a Navy SEAL friend of mine, and we were discussing the topic, and it's very sensitive, when you have national security stuff. And what I said to him and what I've told other people is when they say to me, what do you think they should tell us? And I said, I don't know. Like, I don't have the knowledge to know what is sensitive and what's not, what should be released. That is for guys like David Grusch and his colleagues, people in the National Command Authority, people that understand what makes certain intelligence dangerous and what makes other intelligence more like benign, right? So the answer is, I don't know what they should release. Obviously, they should tell us something, because that's what David Grusch and the colleagues, all the people we know, Priscilla knows John Ramirez, and Deb knows him, and Jim Semivan, and all these other people saying they have to share something with the American people. How much? I don't know. We can't share everything. That's not happening. People that are going to wait to see documents and photographs and videos, you may be waiting a long time, if ever. I don't know that that's going to happen. But the fact, at least if they'll admit that it's there and just give like an overview that's not going to be sensitive to national security, I think we will have made it a long way. So go ahead, Priscilla.
So we're all obviously wanting a big craft, right? I'm sure Congress wants a craft, because that would just end a lot of this. Is it real? Is it not? And obviously we all want to ride in one. But my big question is, why are we so hung up? I mean, other than that, like Gary Nolan pointed it out in the article by The Debrief, that you don't need an entire craft. Think about what silicon has done. A grain of silicon has done for our civilization. If it has something unique about it, then it's worth paying attention to. So I think that some people, like, even though we're in love with the idea of this big, beautiful ship that we can all see and touch and be like, that's weird, looking for hieroglyphs or whatever you're looking for, I think that we need to realize that maybe some of the stuff that we're going to see is going to be more awe-inspiring on a scientific level, because it's radio signature is different, or its chemical composition is different, or the isotopes are something we can't do here. So just keep in mind that the most compelling evidence isn't going to be always a mothership landing wherever you want it to land.
So is that where you're at? Like, if you, we had this question on Cab the other day, so I'll just ask you, if you had, went to a base and you had two hangar doors, and they said behind hangar door number A, you have biological beings. They're either alive or not alive. Behind door B, you have a fully intact craft that you can get a complete tour inside and out. What would you choose? Or in your case, maybe you have pieces of craft that you could, behind door C, you go in a lab and look at some isotope ratios that are anomalous. What would you choose?
I think that I would have to go, it's hard, because if the being is gone, then, then you cannot communicate with it. You can learn like some anatomy and physiology, but with the intact craft, you might be able to sort of make some parallels between this was a new technology that was developed seemingly out of nowhere in our life versus, something that we've seen develop slowly over time. Mm-hmm. And then with the pieces, if you have to be like a molecular nerd or neurochemist or some sort of chemist, but I think that sometimes the pieces would be able to be analyzed more, because you're not going to want to take apart a giant craft and, study it. But so I think that if they were all available, probably the whole craft, because just seeing the technology and what it looks like on the inside, I don't know, I'm torn between that and the pieces, though, because they can be studied in different ways. So I don't know my final answer. That's a good question.
You're like Vinny. Vinny said the craft the other night when we had our little chat. But I would want to see the being.
If they're alive, absolutely. But if they're gone, what can I learn? It would make me really sad too, right? To see these poor beings that just like maybe flying around like how we want to go to Mars, right? Like, and then they end up stuck here. Or I think Deb and I had a conversation about this earlier about people saying like, they must not be that in advance if they're crashing and leaving things behind for us to study, But then again, like, what if they didn't know? What if you can be advanced technologically and maybe have like a not so advanced mindset? Maybe their gift is technology and they just landed here and we're like, oh, atmosphere looks fine. They get out and something happens.
I have to say something about.
I do too. I just want to real quick, two things. Jacques Vallée's hypothesis is that they're being gifted to us, and he's kind of one of the godfathers of this topic, or some of them are being gifted to us. Rick Doty has said to us that that one of their hypotheses is that flying outside of the atmosphere and then inside the atmosphere with in weather where there's basically convective thunderstorms may have brought something like the Roswell craft down in Corona, is flying through in the atmosphere and then convective activity occurs. So I don't know, but that's out there. I'm sorry, Deb. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I just get really upset when people assume that they are an advanced, like super advanced culture and all that just because they have nice cars, essentially. Like I compare it to the Tesla, like just because Musk's company made the Tesla, does that make Musk a better person, more advanced? No. Because he has the spaceship, does that make him more advanced? Not really. Like just having better technology, just because you've probably been around a billion extra years, doesn't mean that you're not a vulnerable being, potentially in an environment that's hostile, and not just because we're people with guns, but also because the atmosphere might not be the best, or the giant sun that we have that's still pretty vibrant is not great for them, because obviously they have really big eyes for a reason, like darkness. I'm just saying, like, I just think people always make that mistake of thinking that their physical being is not invulnerable. So I think they're very vulnerable if they come out of a craft.
But what if it's also what we kind of touched on earlier when we had our it's kind of funny because Deb called me, then you called me, but we kind of, like, before she had to started to go down like an AI rabbit hole. Like, what if the being is not either in the craft, it doesn't need it? What if the craft is the being and it's its AI being? Or what if the beings with the big eyes only they take that car out sometimes, and sometimes they just let it go by itself and remote control it, or, tell it whatever you want to think. So
Right.
we also have to keep that in mind. Like, we don't know enough. And, some advances in biotechnology might give us hints to that. Not that I could think any off the top of my head, but there's some weird stuff happening in biotechnology with AI. So we have to keep AI in the conversation at all times when we're talking about these beings, even if it is interdimensional or ultra terrestrial. What if that's how they control this thing? Maybe they can't cross the threshold, but somehow, because they're artificial intelligence, they can control it from dimension A into dimension B, C, whatever.
And I don't
Also,
want to
say, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Deb.
I don't want to be mean to robots, or computers, but if you come out of your tank, you're probably still pretty vulnerable. Like, even if you're a robot.
Hey, let me just say good evening real quick to Bigfoot influencers. Tim and Dana are in the house. Hello, friends. They're also in actually, I don't think they're in Maryland. They're in Delaware, but they're in your neighboring state, I believe. Also, Deanna says that's a great metaphor, Deb. And Deb, I wanted to commiserate with you on that point. My irritation is slightly different, but very tangential to what you said, which is that when people say, "Oh, if we were to interact with these, we wouldn't even understand. We couldn't understand." And it's like, well, I disagree with that they're looking at us like we're ants and stuff, because ants don't have the ability to perform microsurgery and make it to the moon and Mars and things that we've done. So I think we can understand a lot. I'm not saying that we're on an intellectual parallel with some of these intelligences, or that we can create what they do. But I do think that we do have an incredible ability to listen, to see, and to understand, and to be able to comprehend beyond what our technical, scientific and technological abilities are. So I too share that with you, that people think that just because they're more advanced than us, we can't understand them. It's like, you don't know that. You just don't know that. We can understand a lot. It doesn't mean we can do it. What they can do, clearly we can't make a craft that can do what they can do. There's a lot of things that we've seen that their craft can do that we're not even close to being able to do, but that doesn't mean we can't understand it or understand their their communications with us. So man, what do we have? We got about 5 minutes left. So let's get some parting shots, starting with Deb's.
Oh, I didn't get to do the history. I don't get to do any history.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Let me add it to the stream. Everybody, Deb's finna talk about this. Go back way longer than 1933. Go ahead,
Right.
Debs.
So this was in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle in 1865. It describes this object flying through the sky, knocking over trees, and then all of a sudden, like you at first think, oh, it's like an asteroid, it's a meteorite, it's something like that, because he smells sulfur. But then he's talking about there's hieroglyphs. And then at the end, there's this whole speculation thing happening about who created humanity, which includes something about a superior race being involved, which is really fascinating. So I guess the point of this, to me, is that people are always assuming that this started with Roswell or maybe started in Italy, but this goes way, 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 way back in history. And for anyone interested, the moon dust program is in the DIA FOIAs under the UFO PDFs, and it talks about a group from the U.S. Air Force that would go retrieve objects that would fall, and it seems to have predated satellites, the creation of that group. Witness citizen Sean Rash has found FOIAs that were based on events that happened within the United States with that group. And the DIA FOIAs cover other countries, which probably called us because we had NASA, where the U.S. Air Force would go out to retrieve objects that would fall from the sky. And I think it's pretty telling that those are in the UFO PDFs, that they were not just looking for satellites. So that's all. I just wanted to talk about the history real quick.
Deb, I think what you found here is an extraordinary. I mean, if you look at that timeline, that's like at the conclusion of the Civil War, or during the Civil War, right there. That's like how long ago that they may have found things that we couldn't explain, and that is just. I mean, I didn't know. I knew that Columbus. You know what he had written in his. People say he wrote in his logs about candles going in the water. Mm-hmm. We've heard Roman shields, the flaming shields and so forth. This is pretty extraordinary. I've never heard this context. So, thanks for bringing what you done brought.
Right, and I think honestly, the UFOs in India, like they describe them in their great detail, and they're extraordinary. And they go back thousands of years.
Yep. And they meet like a lot of the 5 observables too. That was like my first video, was the 5 observables in the ancient Vimana of India, because it was just like, I was reading about all the different things that they did and all the things they did, how they appeared and how people described them in the text. And I was like, this is, all about the 5 observables right here. So definitely look into those if you haven't already.
Probably not a coincidence. Sorry, go ahead, DJ.
No, it made me think of having a gray in yoga class and like seeing what they'd be like in down dog, giant head, dipped towards the floor. That'd be interesting. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Like
I don't think it's a coincidence when you look at the spirituality in India, that there's things where they're talking about levitation and they're talking about meditation experiences where they're reaching out to the sky and, just really incredible depth of abilities of humanity and psi abilities. And I think that there's something there.
Absolutely. And how many times have we heard people talk about the relationship between consciousness, telepathy, and these craft or the occupants operating them, or the not occupants in some cases, maybe?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find this. There's a book on breathing of that guy that was on with Joe Rogan. I'm trying to see. Oh, James Nestor. James Nestor was on with Joey Rogan, and he said that there are yogis in India where their breath work, they could change the temperature of each finger. So, like Wim Hof is famous for being able to, he'd sit in a bath. They took him into a lab where the temperature of the water was controlled to like 33 degrees or 34 degrees. I can't remember, but it was somewhere in the 30s. and he could raise. They had him swallow a pill so they could see his core temperature, and he was able to, with his breathing, raise his core temperature while sitting in this water in a lab in the Netherlands. And then James Nestor said, well, they're yogis that can say, well, I want this finger to be warmer than the other. So it's just incredible mind. And this gets to what Anjali talks about all the time, and even John Ramirez talks about this. Is Exoacademian, our friend, talks about this is the meditation aspect of it. All the things they're doing at the Monroe Institute. If you can connect and get inside yourself, you have a chance to connect with these beings on a level that the rest of us either aren't. And I'm sitting here with somebody who has been in contact with these beings in Priscilla. So, but you're not using these methodologies though, Priscilla.
I'm going to do the Monroe stuff, but
you do? Okay.
Unfortunate. So I started my journey with my experiences, and then it seems like the more research I do, I've kind of not delved into trying to make contact, because I'm kind of, if they are there, right, which some of us have experienced, that it's kind of frustrating that they're not being transparent with us, and it's kind of strange. So I don't desire to make contact. I talked to Deb about this, like on our long, it's kind of, I've kind of put a little bit of a barrier up. So I don't know that I would even be able to do that, but I am familiar with Monroe's, gateway process. I'm familiar with how it works. I've got a whole video written that I need to record, a whole podcast written about like the process and the physics involved. I'm just embarrassed and got to find time to do it right, but I haven't done it in a long time. And, it's because I don't know what we're dealing with anymore. It's not obvious to me anymore. The more I research, the less I know, and the less I trust. Not all beings, but some of the ones that might not be as transparent as they should be.
May I? Yeah, and that's a concern, Nathan's had from the beginning. But may I ask you, Priscilla, when you've had contact, has it been unwanted or unexpected? It was unexpected, so you didn't try to.
No,
engender...
it wasn't through that. Okay. I maybe had one, or I've had a few experiences using meditation, and those were good. But other than that, it's been a mix-up of, it being not in my control. And don't come at me with the cosmic contracts and all that, because I've read about that too. This is, I'm not the only one that's experienced something that they didn't want to experience. And I'm not out there looking for it. And I think until we know more, you have to be very wary of just putting your consciousness out there. But I still do Monroe. I still do the meditations. I still want to astral travel. I still want to do these things. But again, your parameters have to be very specific. And I find that when I set the parameters specifically, not a lot of them come around. So that makes me curious. But this would be like a whole nother fireside chat, right?
It would be, yeah. And I was going to say, Deb, are you, do you have a supposition because if Priscilla will correct me if I'm wrong, she had experiences long before she started doing Monroe Institute protocols, right? So, Deb, do you think that they've chosen Priscilla for do you think that was there was a reason why that they wanted to connect with her, as opposed to me? I realize most humans would also want to connect with Priscilla over me, but these intelligences.
Okay, well, Priscilla's awesome. So, of course, anyone would want to connect with Priscilla, first of all.
I know that, but
No, but the truth is that I'm really interested in neuroanatomy. As I've said, like I got a little distracted by this whole, whistleblower telling everyone that there's aliens thing. But, besides that,
biggest story ever, but yeah.
Yeah, so was slightly distracted, but once I get back into it, I'm trying to kind of find the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, which kind of matches a lot of things. It includes the hemisync concept, which is both hemispheres kind of connecting and working together. I think it also kind of addresses the meditation aspect, and it addresses the things Grant Cameron has said about like the other reality and DMT and all of it. And even like how I say, I think consciousness is material. So I believe, if I
Interesting.
have to break it down, that
Deb
some
is so combative. Consciousness is material. You
No.
you etherealists. Go ahead.
well, no, and actually, I've looked into the history of the people who don't. By the way, there was a movement on that, and it's a really interesting history. But I think
I loved it.
that when I study this stuff, it comes down to EM, and I think brainwaves are part of the EM spectrum, and I think some people just have a greater antenna, is a way to put it. And I think, Priscilla, you have one of those antennas, like, and it tracks things to you because they can reach you. And right now you're saying, nope, I'm not open for business.
Unreachable. Because
She has the do not disturb on her iPhone, and they can't reach her.
no, yeah, I've seen enough. Enjoying the uneventfulness at the moment. But yeah, you're right about the brainwaves. In my research, the brainwaves hold the answer to all this ability to contact other places, because there's a point in the brainwave or any wave function where you technically blip into eternity, where there's no time and place, and an hour here might be like 3 years there. We don't know. So that's kind of like what HemiSync lets you tap into without getting into another, getting
And
too far.
just real quickly before we close up the show here, but do you have a theory on why they've contacted you on multiple occasions?
No, the thing that kind of, I think that when I was on Max Moskovich's channel talking to him, he was kind of like, what was going on at that time? And was there any kind of like emotional turmoil or dissonance in the household or anything like that? A lot of people seem to have contact or be contacted when that happens. And whether it's a good experience or a scary experience or less than favorable experience, it tends to happen to people when they're sort of emotionally charged, from what I've noticed and from when I talk to people and hearing other people's stories. And I think that would be the only reason. Like, when you have a emotional trauma or any sort of trauma, it sort of blows out your energetic feelers. So your antenna gets bigger, essentially, or it's able to receive more. So I think that it might be as simple as that.
Can I say also, from a psychology perspective, stress probably kicks in a whole bunch of stuff in our body to survive. And it's, literally, you're going to have a wider perspective or you will die, so like that, to me, that's
right?
right. So there's a key aspect, I think, there. And I'm still looking into all that too when I'm doing this neuroanatomy stuff. So all of my research is probably going to go to Priscilla because she's doing it, and I want her to have everything I have.
That's awesome, man.
We'll just have to have we'll have research dates more often.
Yeah, I was going to say, it reminds me of two Bigfoot researchers that went to very rural Ohio, and one was a younger gentleman, one was a much older gentleman, and other researchers in the area said, you got to meet, Kirk, you got to meet this guy. I can't remember his name, was Bob or whatever. And they basically forced the two of them to come together because they had so much material. And now the Yoda and Obi-Wan are sort of working together as Yoda retires. So Deanna here is saying her experiences sound quite similar to yours. She oddly calls it her antenna as well. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, everybody that came in to hang out with us tonight. We went 9 minutes over just because I got so many questions for Deb and Priscilla, and it's just amazing. So, well, let's just go with goodbyes. Go ahead, Debs.
It's an exciting time. I'm so glad that we get to be here together to deal with what's going on. I have to point out that one thing I would have liked to have mentioned was that everyone was always worried about mass hysteria. The world is doing fine right now. The world is dealing with normal, everyday things. People are still paying their bills and going to work. It's the UFO community that I'm worried about. So I just want to remind everyone that Love is Blind season 3 of Brazil is now on Netflix. And and I recommend that some people who have some comments about Brazilians take a look at that, because maybe they'll open their mind a little bit and stop making some of the comments they've made.
Yeah, my wife's from Brazil, Holmes. So
Oh,
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Bigfoot will come after you if you don't.
yeah,
Um,
and I was going to say also I should share with Priscilla that the show about motorcycle gangs on FX Mayans season 5 is out. Everybody watch
oh my
it.
gosh. Stop.
Just kidding.
Um,
MotoGP this weekend, all kinds of exciting things, and NBA finals I think come back tomorrow night. Man, Priscilla, thank you, buddy. Do you have any parting shots?
Yes, thank you for having me. As always, it's fun to jump on. Hopefully, getting back more into the swing of it and seeing everybody more. But don't forget to, this is very exciting, but take some time to kind of deal with like your real life and real world events. We know Canada is going through horrible fires right now. So please
Oh,
send your
God.
heart, your love, your prayers, whatever you do to them, because even if the fires are contained, there's still a lot of damage. And yeah, this is very important and very exciting to us, but step aside a few times a day to kind of just be with your family and, be away from the UFO thing, because you might come back with fresh eyes and see it even more and even more vibrantly that way.
I couldn't agree more. It's important to have these distractions. I also respect what Deb has said. The world didn't explode. She's been saying this for a long time. That we should know, and everybody's not going to go into a frenzy. In fairness, I think it potentially could be a different story when it's a major news story on all the networks and internationally as well. And if there is that contact event that David Grusch, if you listen to some of the Ross Coulthard footage that's already out in advance of Sunday, David Grusch did say something that Deb has said on this show for a long period of time. Is part of his mission is that people are prepared for a possible contact event. You guys have heard Deb say this on many cab shows. David Grusch is also saying that maybe he has heard from whatever sources that he has that he thinks that there will be a contact event and that people should be prepared so that they don't freak out. So good on you, Debs. From my perspective, where we've gotten to at this point is a place in history that we've never been before. Lou, even if he knew this information tangentially, was not able to bring it out. But with the legislation, first of all, Lou is still in a fight with the Pentagon right now over harassment and his clearance, and still has his lawyers speaking with them. I didn't know that until 2 days ago. And but David was able to bring this information out, and this is a moment in history, right here. This is a moment in history that I think someday will be written in history books. Is the day that maybe the world learned about UFOs. A lot of countries have decided that they wanted the U.S. to take the lead on this. I don't know why they've done that, but that's what they've done, and so the U.S. is. And we have some courageous people that have come forward with information that we have never had confirmed from as high of a source as it is right now. So, wow. And this is during the span of the 2 years in which I met Nathan, I met Debs, I met Priscilla and Vinny and all these different people in the UFO community and started a UFO show. This is in, just about over that, over that 24-month span. So it's why I didn't think we would see history this quickly. People like Debs perhaps did, but here we are. So,
Yeah.
thank
Can
you.
can I make one more comment about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Once upon a time, people didn't believe gorillas were a thing. They then discovered that gorillas were a thing because it was, displayed to the other people, however it was distributed. Indigenous people let people know that gorillas were a thing prior to that, by the way. They should have listened. They didn't. But
Mm-hmm.
guess what? Now it's not a big deal that gorillas are a thing. We're going to get there with humanity too. They're going to realize it's part of nature. They're going to overcome their shock. They're going to realize it's a thing. They're going to realize they should have listened to the indigenous people, and then we're going to be okay.
Thank you, Debs, our resident psychologist. And also Bigfoot, the North American wood ape. I hope that doesn't come out anytime soon because I think they'll be in danger. But that's a real thing as well. they don't have the advocacy. They don't have a David Grusch to come out and speak about that, and it's probably better for Bigfoot that they don't. So on behalf of our friends, of Debs, of Priscilla, of Dan, this is DJ. And by the way, you see there, like, subscribe, all that stuff, just so that, people actually want to pay attention and come on the show with us. We know we can get Priscilla, but who knows if Gary Nolan's going to come back. So, but by the way, next week, Dr. Diana Pasulka will be on with us. So tune in for Dr. Pasulka. I believe it's Wednesday or Thursday. I'll check that. We'll be coming out with promo soon. But we were going to talk to Dr. Pasulka about paranormal spirits and things like that. And boy, we have some bigger stuff to talk about. So
That's going to be amazing.
yeah, I'm so excited that she's going to come back and we'll be able to kick it around. So thank you, Priscilla, Debs, DJ, Cabs. As always, we say peace out, one love. We'll see you down the road. And, we're always wondering what's up around the bend.